Hello and welcome to my third O-scale layout construction video. Um, Starting here, we start off with some Girder construction, which I have never done before. And start off with that, trying to figure out the angle for this, and of course getting it level, given the fact that the floor is unlevel, posed quite a few challenges, but I finally got it. And have it secured to the beam, and you can now see the horizontal brace that will be on top also, before the risers will be attached. All 1x4 and 2x2 construction, just like the rest of the layout. There will be some other girder, but this is all I have completed for now. But it will go around the beam on the north side. That carried on with some of the grid construction, which goes around the perimeter. These are all modules of 3 foot by 6 foot in length, except for where down at the end here, where I added basically a 2x2 piece, 2x3, excuse me, to fill that in. And this is all just roughed in right here. Again, it's bolted to the wall, and then the 2x2s are carriage bolted. I also added 3/16 cork underneath the legs also. I thought I'd try some decoupling of sound was the intention. How much? I don't know. But it seemed like the thing to try. I've never done that before. Again, trying some new things here. So carried on with some of this, the clamping of some of the modules in place to kind of get an idea of visual, how it might be laid out before I splice in the other pieces, or basically stick build the rest of it. So that way it fills in between the L-girder and the grid. You see the difference in height, and that's because the grid is the lower level staging area, which we've had a change of thought on how this was going to be at this end. This is the south end. I'll talk about that in a minute. So this is a test area here also where I added in the second layer of grid and started to lay out some samples, if you will, of some 3/4 inch plywood with some 3/16 road bed and some of the Ross track and switches to get a feel for the height and how it might be laid out, and then end up adjusting a little bit as far as what height the grid will actually be for the main portion of the layout. So lower level is the staging, and then the grid is actually going to be the main, which has 2 levels to it. It's mostly 3 feet wide, except for some areas where it's going to be 4, and even some cases where we're looking now to the left there, it'll actually be 9 feet wide, where it goes out to the widest portion before it goes through the wall. Excuse me, here's some portions here where it's showing some of the rise going from the staging up through the wall. And I just have laid out some of the track work, again looking for a visual, get a feel for that. These are some of the raw switches, of which some I purchased used and others are new, and a lot of them I removed the switch machines off of them and decided to go with Tortoise switch machines instead underneath the table for more realistic type of effect, and also afford a little different control, and I kind of like the slower mechanism. Some of these I got used and got some parts from Steve at Raw Switches. Thank you very much for that. And got all these switches fixed up and ready to go. And again, some of these I purchased new, like the 4-ways. Amazing switches, very good quality. I can't say enough about their quality and customer service to boot. So again, just some different pictures of the switches. I ordered a pretty significant roll of 1/8 inch cork and decided to lay that down again as a sound barrier, if you will, between the track. It helps having the wood ties, and then against the 1/2 inch plywood. That really helps considerably to reduce track noise. So I laid that out, and now I started to lay down some switches and get an idea for where the staging yards would actually be. And added an 096 switch also that was going to go off to, or will go off to our bench area. That was kind of an afterthought also, but it seemed like a thing to do, so we went ahead and added that. So again, just started getting a feel. Most of the tracks that you see here are just laid out, just kind of eyeballing it right now. I've got some test paper there and just measuring the widths, and basically put together everything so it was hot, meaning that I could go ahead and run some test locomotives over it in some cars and get a feel for the spacing. and ended up narrowing it down to 3.5 inch. Got it as tight as I possibly could. I think in some of these shots it's 4.5. I was concerned when it got to the corners that some of the bigger cars would run into each other, and that turned out to not be the case. Given that we have such large radius, it was not a problem. Now granted, I don't have any large steam locomotives, and that could be a different case where the cab swings wide and might run into it, but we'll be sure to run those on the wide radius. So after I got done test fitting, then I pulled it all back up and started to lay it down permanently. And here it is where it's going down permanent, and putting in the actual, putting the blocks in place, putting the switch machines in place underneath. Great fun taking my time doing it and making a nice precision fit. That way it'll ensure years of trouble-free operation. So some different shots of that. I had to hand cut some sections of track. Basically need 3-inch spacers to bring you to the proper spacing for everything. Also added on the left there, you'll see a 11-degree switch. That's going to be a little switchback, and also use it for a programming track for the MTH locomotives. That was an afterthought also. It's not in the original plan. But part of the beauty of your layout is you can you see things and change and modify. There's nothing is set in stone until you start to do it, and nothing says you can't go back and change it later either. So again, just some different shots of the layout here of the staging. This shot shows a little close-up of the Tortoise switch where it comes up, and you can see the piano wire that comes up through a hole underneath. Two different shots there. And coming up, I've got some shots of the Tortoise motors and the wiring for that. So here's one of them. Can't say enough about these. These are amazing. Very good product. Yes, it takes some time to install, but actually I've kind of got it down now. I figured out how to do it pretty quickly. Don't even need a helper, but it's best if you do. I suggest that. I use some Ethernet wire, some category 6 wiring for my hookup. This is and some Euro connectors. You can see them here in the video. These are some LEDs that go on the control panel. It starts going by kind of quickly here, but you can see that they change colors. So that will indicate which way the switch is thrown. And using my old control panel, I quickly mounted them in there. It's kind of rough. You can see what it's like when they change color. So that's what the future panel will be like. So I carried on then with the rest of the north and off to the east, laying down some more cork. Getting that laid out and spliced into place and glued down. Glued down in some sections. I didn't need to glue down the whole thing because the track and the screws will hold that down just fine. I don't know if I mentioned this in a previous video, but this is about 25 inches off the floor is the height for the staging, which is very low. I've never made one this low, but again, it's not the main layout. This is just the staging. So some areas here that need to be filled in, I'm starting to put in the curves, get them placed and get an idea for where they're going to go. To the right there, I will need to add a little bit of a corner piece to allow the 054 and the 060 to fit in between there. Which I don't think I mentioned, by the way. I've changed this. This is going to be 054 through 114 now. It's going to be a full 8 tracks back to the original design. This is some shots that show clearance. I was kind of concerned about the clearance, that I might have to cut out some of the bracing and redo that. But there is plenty of room. These are my tallest cars. I have the double stackers especially. Plenty of height. Plenty of room to reach in and to get to anything in case anything happens. And of course, as we know, it will. Something will go wrong. Something will derail. Something will fail. And I'll be able to access it. Not a problem. And just some different shots. This is looking at the east wall, carrying on with some of the cork, some of the plywood. This is a little different shot here. I shouldn't say a different shot. It's a rethought. I'd actually planned on putting the switches on the east wall and decided to move them to the south instead. And the reason being is I decided that, actually my son and I decided, in lieu of the track coming up to the upper level, it's actually going to go down underneath and turn around. It's going to be a reversing loop instead. And we'll do away with one reversing loop that will be up on the main layout, which will afford us a little more space, and it'll be less construction design as far as the framework. So coming down the 408, then going into a number 6 curve switch. And the end shot here that shows how it's going to come together. This is incorrect though. This is a 3x6 module, and we're actually going to make it into a 3x8 instead, and then stick build the rest of it to finish it. That's basically it, and as soon as I get more done, I will be posting that for you. Thanks so much for everybody for watching, and I sure appreciate your support.